G'day, Chris and Brook from V2. Brook's the main man. I'm the guy behind the camera again. It is a bit loud. Well, we've got a bit of rain here, and I do promise to get some microphones before the next episode. So what we're really at now is the cases are pulled apart. We've just got to look at the main bearing sleeves, get the bearings out, and get it ready and blasted so we can start putting the engine back together. So, without further ado, hopefully I haven't cut the top of my head off because I'm a bit taller than you. So, yeah.
I think you're taller than me.
Only a little bit. Okay, so yeah, let's get into it.
Right.
So, like and subscribe if you want, and we'll go. See you.
Okay, so as Chris says, we're going to go through the main bearing situation on these bevel drives. They are inherently bad, the way that they were assembled initially. We've done a lot of experimenting through racing as well to get the correct interference on the crankcase, not just with the bearing. So you've got a bearing, which is actually quite a special bearing. It's an angular contact, which I'll go through. And then you have a sleeve, a main bearing sleeve. So this sleeve, you used to be able to buy them from the factory, and they came in a standard size. You heat the case up, drop it in, and then you let that get hot, and then you drop the main bearing in the main bearing sleeve. I would say that more than 95% of the bearings of engines that we do here in C, when you split the cases and go to take the bearings out, the bearings often fall out of the crankcase, which means that the bearing is spinning, the outside of the bearing is spinning in the main bearing sleeve, which is obviously not ideal. And even the sleeve can be loose in the crankcase. Not so common, but it does happen. So the first thing is you've got to, if the main bearings are still in the sleeve, which this one is on our project bike, I suspect it's going to be loose. So I'm going to, the first thing to do is get the bearings out, and then when the bearings are out, we've got to get the main bearing, well, we've got to measure the main bearing sleeve. In this case, I'm going to change them anyway because we're building this engine as doing everything on it, even if I don't need to do it. So, and these main bearing sleeves will need to do it, I'm sure, but we'll see. We're going to run a weld around the inside of the main bearing sleeve to get it out of the crankcase, and that will shrink the main bearing sleeve and it will fall out easily. The other one, I'm going to knock it out with a punch to show you that you can take them out with a punch. This one, which I'll show you when we get it out, is a little bit more difficult to get out with a punch, but you can do it. And there's another way you can weld it. You can actually weld a brace across it and knock it out, because on this one you can get to the outside of the sleeve and knock it out on the flange. This one, the flange is behind the crankcase, so it's a bit difficult. So we'll get this one out. We'll see how tight it is. So I suspect that bearing is really, really loose. But I'll see them loosen that. Look at that. I'd be able to push that out with my hand. So there you go. That's a classic case. And if you look at this main bearings, if you look at the outside diameter, you can see all the lines on here where it's been spinning in the crankcase. So instead of spinning in here and using the balls, it's actually turning on here as well. So, and again, on here, you can see that that's the sleeve, and you can see that that's been spinning, and you can see marks on that, and also this one is the other side, which the main bearing fell out when we took the crank out, and you can see that one is even worse. So that one, you can see all the lines in the sleeve. Now the sleeves aren't loose in the crankcase, but they are worn out in here. So if I put a new main bearing sleeve, if I put a new main bearing in there, that's going to be loose, and that's not what we want. People Loctite them in, etc. But that's a short-term fix, and it's not ideal. The crankcases are moving, there's a lot of load on those sleeves. So let's take this one out. And if you have a look here, Chris, this one, you can see the flange. So what we're looking at is that flange there, and we'll be able to knock that out reasonably easy. So that's quite tight, but it's going. So this one, the bearing is tight in the cases. That's good, but the interference between the bearing, the OD of the bearing and the ID of the sleeve was not right from new. Otherwise, it wouldn't be doing this. So there it goes. It's going a lot easier now. So there you go. So that main bearing sleeve is out. This hole here is ready for checking and measuring. They sometimes they're not round. They weren't machined round. Sometimes they were machined oversized or undersized. They just weren't very. You don't find them to be a standard number. So there's the old sleeve. We'll check that in a minute just to see what it does measure. But you can see that it's been spinning. So that's dead. So that's that one, and this one. If you've got it doesn't matter what sort of welder. Either stick welder or a MIG. I use a MIG, but you can use a stick. That's fine. And what we're going to do is we're going to weld around here. Put some welds around here, and when we've done that, firstly it'll leave a shoulder for us to tap from the other side, but they literally fall out. So we'll move that. Cover it up. So the other thing, if you're going to put the our welder earths through the bench. So if you've got a bench that earths like this, you can't put the crankcase on the bench. Cylinder heads, anything aluminium. If you're going to weld it, you cannot put it on the bench because it'll weld okay, but where the contact point on the aluminium, the crankcase, the head, clutch cover, whatever you're doing, touches the steel, it will arc and make it look that it'll actually take a bit off the crankcase. It'll actually mark it. It won't be. You'll see where it touches the bench. So if I have this bit of aluminium in the welding bay here, and if I'm going to do welding, I'll stick the crankcase on the aluminium, and it won't do it. It'll arc between the plate and the bench, but it won't arc between the crankcase and the aluminium because it's aluminium on aluminium. So here we go. Give this well. You can feel the stress there. It won't go there. I'll just run a weld around there, so I'll turn it over and do a bit on the other side, do a bit there. Go. So, just down here, move that away. Now main bearing sleeve will pretty well that will so you can get the punch and you can get it on that lip of the sleeve, and there you go. Now it's going. So you can see the gap in here, Chris? The gap of the sleeve up in here. So between the crankcase, so you can get onto that gap. And it's actually, it is very good. So it's shrunk, there you go. So there's your, that's the crankcase. That, you know, that looks okay. It hasn't, that definitely hasn't been spinning. And here's your main bearing sleeve. The OD hasn't been spinning, but we saw that the inside was, so that's rubbish. Okay, so crankcase doesn't heat up, so enough to affect the measurement of it. So there's a formula basically, because you've got, in this situation, you've got two lots of interference. You've got the interference, between the bearing and the inside of here, and you've got the interference between the outside of that sleeve and in there. So, through a lot of experimenting and trying different amounts, and like I said, racing them, putting them under load, you need to have a total of between 0.5 of a millimetre and 0.7. So 0.5 and 0.7 is sort of 2 to 3 thou, in 2 to 3 thousandths. So it actually doesn't matter when I say total interference. All the interference could be in the bore of the bearing, 0.5, 0.7. Or it could be on the outside of the insert. So that insert won't go in there, and that's because it's oversized. What we do is we try and split it. So we have these in stock, we manufacture them, and this diameter of all the ones in stock is oversized. This, the bore, has got interference between this and the bearing already. So I would check this. I would check that diameter just to see what it is, and I've written it here 0.4. So that means that this sleeve has already got 0.4 interference between a new bearing and the bore. It's already got 0.4. So we've got 0.3 or so, 0.2, 0.3 to play with, to put interference between here and the crankcase.
Yep.
So when we make these and have them in stock, they're made on our CNC machine, and they're all pretty much accurate and the same, but it might be 0.4, it wouldn't be more than 0.4, it might be 0.3, it might be 0.2, and it doesn't matter that it's a different size, a different interference, as long as I know what it is, so I can use it in the calculation. So every time I do one, I measure the bore, write it in, and that's what I'm working to on this particular bearing. Then I'm going to put this in here, and I'm going to measure that hole in this direction, which is the front cylinder where the load is, and the rear. So it's at 90 degrees, obviously, 90 degrees between. So we've got a measurement across here, and we've got a measurement here. So this is an inside mic, and you can do it with a telescopic gauge. I do use telescopic gauges, which are fine. A lot of people don't like using them, but I find them actually quite good and quite fast, faster than these. So these, yeah, definitely slower, but probably for people who don't do it all the time, it's probably more accurate. So the ovality of this hole is also what we're looking at. Okay, so that is a standard size. It's 86 mil that from the factory. It's 86, and the factory drawings, which I have, show that hole as 86 mil exactly, plus or minus 0.1, I think they give it. But I don't reckon they've ever machined one that accurate ever. They're always over or under, or now and again you do get one that's right. But that one there, across that way, is 0.2. That's 0.2. It's 0.2 larger than what it should be across this dimension, which doesn't matter because we're going to machine the sleeve to suit. We'll just check it this way. And chances are it won't be perfectly round, but what I do is I just take an average. Actually, it's not bad. It's actually not bad. So, we'll check that one. That's the vertical cylinder, and that dimension is pretty well the same. Yeah, 0.2. It's the same. So it is, at least it's round, but it is 0.2, which is it's 1,000, so oversized from what it should be. So I must admit I don't know that I've ever measured a standard factory sleeve that hasn't been fitted. So I don't know what they gave them. I don't think they give you a size of that. Maybe they do, but I can tell you what it should be. So we've already got 0.4 in here on the bearing. So I've got a jig that this goes back in the lathe, and it doesn't clamp in the chuck this way because it would distort the bearing. It clamps over these two faces here, so it sandwiches the jig. It sandwiches the main bearing sleeve in the jig. That you make that run dead true, and then you would machine this. Like I said, we've already got 0.4 on the bore, so we want another let's give it say 0.2, 0.3 on interference here. So that's measuring 0.2 over. So another 0.2 would be 0.4. So we would machine this to 86.04. That would be the size of that main bearing sleeve. Go in there, heat her up, drop it in, drop the main bearing in, happy days. That will last forever, and it won't come loose, and it won't put too much load on the bearing. If you gave it another 2 thou somewhere interference, when you put the bearing in and it cooled down, it would be horrible and notchy and hard, and the bearing will fail. If it is loose, it'll go in now, and you might feel, oh, well, the bearing's in there and it's not falling out and it's okay, but it will come loose. 100% it will come loose if it's got more. It's got less interference than what I'm saying. So this is one of those things that even the factory data would not even close to being right. And it's basic engineering. It's not rocket science. It's not my opinion. It's an engineering fact, and people need to understand that. This sort of thing, interference on bearings, is not someone's opinion. The bearing companies design it to give it the right amount. I've done testing and made sure that it works, and that's it. So every single engine that we change the main bearing sleeves on, which is most, is going to have the right interference. And you can do it at home. Your engine builder can do it. They can call us. They can email us if they need. If they've got a question. I'm more than happy to help either yourself or the engine builder who's doing it for you and steer him in the right direction. If this hole was oval in the crankcase, you would put the crankcase in a milling machine or a boring machine, and you would bore this hole. You'd get the balance air out, and you'd bore it round, and then you tell us what the size is, and we would machine it to suit. So if you're ordering main bearing sleeves, you need to. I can supply a main bearing sleeve that chances are will be right, but I don't like doing that. if you can get someone to measure the sleeve, to measure the case for you once they're out, and let us know what it is, we will machine the main bearing sleeve to suit your crankcase, each one, and you'll get them and we'll drop them in, and that'll be perfect. So there you
Now-
go. That's where we're at.
Question from the gallery.
Yes.
Obviously, we're not going to talk about putting the new main bearing sleeves. We've talked about the interference fit. We won't talk about putting the new ones in until we're at that point when we rebuild the engine,
Yeah,
right?
when we're doing the engine rebuild, all this will all be blasted and washed out, all the galleries washed out, and the fitting of the bearings in the crankcases is a process on its own.
Yep.
And we have heat pencils. I don't know whether the audience, the viewers are aware of those, but they're like a crown. And when you're warming the crankcase, whether it be with propane or whatever you're doing it with, or oven, you can touch the pencil or this crown thing on the crankcase, and it will tell you exactly how hot it is. You can use these infrared guns. Aren't bad. These are quite good. Like they do display the temperature. But I mean, I find that the temperature pencils are very accurate, and we have them at 25-degree intervals. And you can try it, when you're trying to build up to a temperature, you can build it up and try it. It's not hot enough, not hot enough. And if you go over, you get the next one up and try it, and just wait till it'll cool down. That's it. Drop them in. So
Righto.
it's very accurate.
So these cases have to be blasted and cleaned and everything. We've got a few other things to get out. These bearings, and also the lower bevel gears.
Yeah.
So do you want to explain to the viewers if there's any issues
Not
getting these out?
for sure. So I mean, look, these bevel blocks will unbolt and bolt out, and the disassembly of these will go into that when we do the bevel. When we shim the bevels, we'll definitely explain that. All the other bearings in the crankcase, they've got retaining screws in it.
Yep.
This one, what the factory does, this will be another thing that we explain. But see these centre pump marks here with the centre punch? That is factory. That's what they did. They put the bearing in, and they belted the crankcases with a centre punch to try and hold the bearing in. I'm not kidding, that's what they did.
Oh, yeah.
On the later model engines, the Millets actually had it. They had, on the other side, they've got cap screws with washers holding it in.
Okay.
And on the Millet, they put bolts with washers holding it in, and all the belt drive have a plate with bolts in it to hold it in. So we actually fixed that, and we drill and tap it, and we put cap screws in it to hold it. When we go through that, you can also do that at home, and we can supply the little screws and all that with a drawing of how to do it. So that's certainly worth doing, and I'll explain why. Because this bearing can walk out. If it does come out or walk out a bit, it won't come right out because it'll hit the main shaft on the gearbox. But you can have major problems selecting fourth gear, and people actually put a new chain on. They have trouble getting the front sprocket off, and they belt the thing with a hammer or a punch or something, or a rattle gun to undo the nut. And this bearing with the rattle gun will walk over, and they put the chain on, put the sprocket on, jump in their bike, go for a ride, no fourth gear. What's happened to my gearbox? What's happened is that shaft that has moved over and is not allowing the fourth gear to go in and engage with the output shaft. And it's actually easy to fix. I've got a slide hammer again that goes on the sprocket nut. You can slide it back without splitting it and pull the bearing back in, and it'll be fine. But you wouldn't believe how many people ring up and say, "I'll put a new chain on my bike and I can't get fourth gear." What did you put a sprocket on with the rattle gun? Yep, I did. Right, this is what you got to do. So not uncommon. This bearing, sorry,
Yes, that's going to be the hardest to get out.
This bearing, there is a factory tool to pull that out. You can buy that tool, which is an expandable mandrel in the middle with a slide hammer. You can buy that tool from any tool shop, and you can get a cheap one that'll do it. So you don't need to heat the crankcases, but that would make it easier. But we don't need to. The other thing you can do is, if you want to, you could weld. You can weld to that, and often you can get a nut, a decent sized nut, and weld it on, and then use your slide hammer to screw into that, and then slide hammer it out.
Yeah.
So I often do that.
Okay.
So that, and really that is the only one that you can't remove from knocking it from the other side.
Fair enough. What about the bush?
I don't think. Well, I've changed bushes because I've changed, replaced crankcases and had to swap the bushes over. But these bushes, I don't think I've ever seen one worn out. That's a kickstart bush.
Yep.
Cool. I don't think I've ever seen one worn out. The only reason you'd need to change that, so that stays in there, is if you were taking the kickstart out and putting an electric start on it, or you're putting a kickstart on an engine that was an electric start, and you need to change the bushes over. So the bushes you don't really need to worry about.
Right. So just for people who don't know, when you take out the 4 cap head screws here, basically you can just tap that out with a soft mallet or a plastic hammer.
This whole assembly will come out as one unit.
Yep.
And then we're going to pull that apart and go through it, and I'll show you. These have got special bearings in as well. These are angular contacts, which are what the main bearings are. So this engine uses angular contacts on the crankshaft, on the mains, and it uses angular contacts in this bevel here, which is, they're great bearings, but they do take a bit to set up. You don't just knock them out and put a new set in. They've got to be shimmed, and they oppose each other. So they're a thrust bearing. They're a thrust bearing. Very similar principle to the tapered wheel bearings on a car, on the front of your car, or on your car, front wheel drive and rear wheel. The tapered rollers on your car, on the wheel bearings, they actually run a bit of clearance so that the lubrication can get through. These crankshafts don't run any clearance, and they're a ball that go up against a shoulder in the bearing. And the same with these. These are a ball race. These are a ball race, not a tapered roller. And they don't run any clearance, and they actually have to have preload on them to continue to work correctly. So again, we'll be shimming the crankshaft and showing you what happens if you overload it, if you underload it, and the same with these. There is a torque loading on the shaft, correct, that the bearing company will state that that particular bearing needs to have. And the issue with that, of course, is that on an engine that's going hot and cold, it's going to have different torque loading on the shaft when it's hot than what it's going to have when it's cold, and that's where you've got to be really careful. But we'll get to that.
Okay.
There you go, Chris. I reckon that's enough to consider for a while.
Righto, I better sit down so I don't cut my head off.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone. Thanks, Brook.
You're welcome.
So the next stage, really, we'll just tap these lower bevel gear housings out and so on, and we'll clean them up, vapor blast them. We've probably been a little bit busy to put little sideline videos in, but we're keeping on with this, which is great. And we'll get this ready, and we'll start getting it together.
We will show the viewers. We do 2 blastings. There is a dry blast, which is the dry blast, and then there's a vapor blast or wet blast, which is done with a different grade of glass, and it's a slurry. It's water and there's glass bead, and that actually closes the pores of the aluminium and gives it a very, very good finish, just like it is comes from the factory. And the finish will last a lot longer. It's a great process. But one of the things that we'll show is people just take their crankcases in and get to someone and get them blasted. We spend probably at least between 1 and 2 hours preparing the crankcases to blast, because you've got to block every hole with every hole with a thread in it gets something screwed into it. All the oil galleries get blocked up, so you don't get dust on the oil gallery. We see so many failed engines that have been blasted because people don't understand. And the guy that's doing the blasting, take it to some blaster, they're not going to know. Can you blast my cases? Yep, no worries, mate, I'll do it. And they do it. Guy goes home, washes his cases up. He doesn't know that the oil galleries are all full of glass beads and whatever. It's a trap and it's a nightmare, and I see it all the time. So blasting is not, you're not blasting a frying pan that you're trying to cook on, or a piece of, or a mudguard off your car. You're blasting a high-tech engine that's got oil galleries in it, and you've got to know what you're doing, and you've got to do it properly, and you've got to make sure all the stuff comes out. Otherwise, the engine will fail. So, important.
Very important. Thanks again for watching. I hope you're enjoying the series and Brook imparting all his knowledge. And we'll see you next episode. And like and subscribe, please. See ya.
Well,